A few days ago, I was at the supermarket doing a normal grocery run, and I picked up a bar of Toblerone. Now, if you've ever seen Toblerone, you know those famous triangular chocolate peaks. But something looked strange. The triangles seemed further apart. There were bigger gaps between them. At first, I thought maybe I was remembering it wrong. But I wasn't. There was simply less chocolate in the bar. The price looked the same. The packaging looked the same. But the product had quietly shrunk. And that's when I realized something interesting. This isn't just happening to one chocolate bar. It's happening to products all over supermarkets. And there's actually a name for it. It's called shrinkflation. So what exactly is shrinkflation? Hey, I'm Max. If you enjoy this kind of content, drop a like and subscribe. It really helps. Now, back to it. Shrinkflation happens when a company reduces the size, weight, or quantity of a product while keeping the price the same. In simple terms, you pay the same amount of money, but you get less product. A 200-gram snack might become 180 grams. A cereal box might lose a small portion of its weight. An ice cream tub that once held a full liter might quietly become slightly smaller. The packaging usually looks almost identical, which means many people never even notice. But mathematically, you're paying more for less. And that's why economists often describe shrinkflation as hidden inflation. Now, you might be wondering, why do companies do this instead of simply increasing the price? The answer mostly comes down to consumer psychology. People notice price increases immediately. If your favorite snack suddenly jumps from £1 to £1.40, customers react quickly. They complain, they switch brands, or they stop buying the product altogether. But if the price stays the same and the product becomes slightly smaller, many people don't notice the change at all. The price feels familiar. And that's why companies often see shrinkflation as the less risky option. Over the past decade, many products sold in the UK have quietly reduced in size. Chocolate bars that once weighed 200 grams are now often closer to 180 grams. Crisp packets that used to be slightly heavier have become a bit lighter. Even some well-known chocolate brands such as Cadbury have reduced the size of certain products over time. Sometimes the packaging design barely changes, so unless you check the weight printed on the back, the difference can be easy to miss. But shrinkflation isn't just happening in the UK. It's happening across the world. In North America, Europe, and many other regions, the same pattern appears. So what's actually causing this? Why has shrinkflation become so common? The biggest reason is rising production costs. Companies face increasing expenses in many different areas. The cost of ingredients can rise dramatically. For example, chocolate manufacturers rely on cocoa, sugar, and milk. If the global price of cocoa increases, producing chocolate suddenly becomes more expensive. So companies have to find ways to adjust. Energy is another major factor. Factories need electricity and fuel to run machinery. Transport companies need fuel to move goods from factories to warehouses and supermarkets. When energy prices rise, the cost of producing and delivering products increases as well, and these costs eventually reach the companies that manufacture the products we buy every day. Packaging costs also play a role. Materials like plastic, aluminium, and cardboard have all become more expensive over time. Even a small increase in packaging cost can matter when millions of units are being produced, so companies often look for ways to balance those rising costs. Reducing the quantity of the product inside the package becomes one possible solution. Labor costs can also influence product pricing. Wages in many countries have gradually increased over time. In the UK, minimum wages have risen significantly during the past decade. Higher wages are good for workers, but they also increase operating costs for manufacturers. And when costs rise across multiple areas at the same time, companies are forced to make adjustments somewhere. Sometimes that adjustment shows up as a smaller product. The past few years have made these pressures even stronger. Global supply chains experienced disruptions during the pandemic. Shipping costs increased sharply. Certain ingredients became harder to source. Energy prices surged across Europe, and inflation rose across many economies. For many manufacturers, production costs increased far more quickly than usual. Shrinkflation became one way to manage those pressures without drastically raising prices. Competition is another important factor. Supermarkets are extremely competitive places. If one brand suddenly increases its price too much, customers may switch to a cheaper alternative. So instead of raising prices sharply, companies sometimes reduce the size of the product while keeping the price stable. That way, the product still appears competitive when customers compare prices on the shelf. There's also an interesting psychological effect behind this strategy. Many consumers say they would prefer companies to simply raise prices rather than reduce product sizes. But studies often show something surprising. People react more strongly to visible price increases than they do to smaller product sizes. In other words, even if people dislike shrinkflation in theory, they often tolerate it more easily than a direct price jump, and businesses are very aware of that behavior. Over time, however, these small changes can add up. Imagine a chocolate bar that originally weighed 200 grams and cost £2. That means you are paying £1 per 100 grams. Now imagine the manufacturer reduces the bar to 180 grams, but keeps the price at £2. Now you're paying about £1.11 per 100 grams. That's effectively an 11% increase in price per gram. But because the price tag didn't change, most people don't perceive it as inflation. That's exactly why economists call shrinkflation stealth inflation. So is shrinkflation actually legal? Yes. In the UK and most other countries, companies are allowed to change product sizes as long as the correct weight or quantity is clearly displayed on the packaging. Supermarkets also provide something called unit pricing. This is the small label on the shelf that shows the price per 100 grams or per kilogram. And that unit price is actually one of the easiest ways to detect shrinkflation. Because even if the package size changes, the price per unit reveals the true cost. For example, you might see two cereal boxes that both cost £3, but one box might contain 500 grams, while another contains only 420 grams. At first glance, the price looks identical, but when you check the unit price, the difference becomes obvious. One may cost 60 pence per 100 grams, while the other costs 71 pence per 100 grams. That's where shrinkflation becomes visible. So what can consumers actually do about it? The first step is simply awareness. Once you know shrinkflation exists, you begin to notice it more often. Check the weight printed on packaging. Look at the price per 100 grams or per litre. Sometimes a slightly more expensive product actually gives better value, and sometimes supermarket own brand products offer better quantity compared with big brands. Over time, these small choices can help reduce how much shrinkflation affects your grocery spending. But realistically, shrinkflation is unlikely to disappear anytime soon. From a business perspective, it works. It allows companies to respond to rising costs without causing sudden price shocks for customers. And in competitive markets, businesses are constantly balancing price, quantity, and demand. So shrinkflation has quietly become part of modern retail. The next time you're walking through a supermarket, take a closer look at the products on the shelves. Check the weight. Look at the unit price. You might notice that some of the products you've been buying for years aren't quite the same anymore. Not because the price changed, but because the product itself quietly shrank. And that's the subtle world of shrinkflation. A small change in size, a quiet shift in value, and a reminder that sometimes the real price of things isn't written clearly on the label. Sometimes you have to look a little closer.